Tomodachi Life is amazing. Anyone who's played it can tell you this. And this has been the reoccurring problem in the community over the past couple of years because, like, every time we get a Princess Peach Showtime or a Mario and Luigi Brothership or, like, some new Nintendo game, you always have the naysayers coming out and just being like, oh, this isn't going to move consoles. This isn't a major release. It doesn't matter how well it does or, like, how good the game is. Like, all anybody cares about is that, like, well, it's not going to outsell Call of Duty. It's not going to be the next Fortnite. And this is a very bad way of looking at it. Like, really, genuinely a bad way of looking at it. Because it really underestimates just the sheer variety of the kind of people who play Nintendo games now. It downplays every single game that comes out in every single genre. It downplays everything that's not a 3D Mario game or a Zelda game, and it just ends up becoming kind of embarrassing, especially when you get situations like, say, in the post Tears of the Kingdom period, where we were going through this song and dance where, like, they're never going to produce another top-down Zelda ever again. Like, I want a top-down Zelda, Nintendo. And then they produced it with Echoes of Wisdom. And then, like, the same people tried to flip and say, like, well, that's not a real Zelda game. That's not what I wanted. That's not what I meant. It's a spin-off. You know, excuses, right? Excuses. That's all we hear from the community. And I think Tomodachi is a really good example of this because we were told for the first half of the year that, like, nothing was coming out. The Switch 2 had, like, a derelict, like, release schedule, that they needed to make major announcements like now, you know, and they needed to do it in the Nintendo Direct format so we could react to it, right? We were told that, and then we saw, like, the entire shebang just kind of collapse, okay? We saw, like, game after game after game, games like Mario Tennis Fever, Pokepia, and now, like, Tomodachi Life do really, really well on the console. And everybody just kind of neatly tries to brush it under the rug. Like, they're ignoring, like, all the trash they're under there. They're ignoring how it's bulging, how it's higher than, like, you know, the things that you want to pay attention to. They want you to pay attention to, stuff like Pragmata. You know, they're ignoring every single Nintendo Switch 2 game, and eventually, like, there just isn't going to be enough rug to cover it all, essentially. And that's kind of the process we're in now, is that we haven't seen anything yet. Is, like, for the first year of Switch 2, we haven't gotten any major announcements. We haven't gotten any major game-changing things. And the simple reality is, we're at the point now where we don't really need it, okay? The Switch 2 was perfectly capable of coasting along by simply the existence of the Switch 1. You know, that was such a great console, such a well-received thing, that everybody is just playing their Nintendos, playing Switch 1s or Switch 2s, and just having a great time, you know? You don't have to upgrade to a Switch 2 immediately. This is one of the things that, like, people don't understand. You know, I was talking to some guy, and everyone, like, you know, I've been talking to people, and, like, a lot of people are still playing their Switch 1s. You know, they'll upgrade when they feel like it, when something they have to have comes out, but for right now, a lot of people are just, like, you know, not necessarily going out to buy a Switch 2. Now, that doesn't mean the Switch 2 is doing bad, you understand. Like, what you have to understand is, it's not, you don't see people go out and buy the brand new hardware day one, okay? Nobody does that, okay? Like, most sales naturally are going to be over, like, a long period of time. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Switch 2, is that, like, games are coming out on it, and they're selling a lot over a long period of time. You know, plenty of people are still picking up Xenoblade Chronicles X, you know, old Tales games, they're playing Star Fox, okay? You know, they're playing, like, Super Mario Galaxy. You know, that game is 19 years old, and people played, like, both, paid full price for it. You know what I mean? Like, you see, like, you know, I bought it twice, you know? Like, you see how, like, how this is, what this is resulting in, right? Is that we're in a situation now where there are no dry spells in the Nintendo release schedule. Like, it's not really possible for that to happen, because nobody plays every single game that comes out. You know, if you're looking for something to play, you can just go on the eShop, you can just look around, you can pick up something for, like, the weekend or whatever. The problem we're having now is that, like, the Nintendo community seems hyper-fixated on pushing the meme that, like, people only want to hear about, like, general Nintendo Directs. People want to hear about, like, major Nintendo exclusives, and then they don't really care about anything else. And I do think that it is a very bad way of looking at it, honestly, because we're seeing this more and more often. You see people like Arlo make videos like complaining about directs like the instant they come out. Arlo did this video, in September with the last Nintendo Direct came out. Like, I don't think this is the Direct the Switch 2 needed right now. The idea, what they wanted was like huge blowout announcements for the next several years. And instead we got things that were coming out in the next 6 months. And that got a lot of people salty. Okay. A lot of people were very upset by that. And they're especially annoyed by the fact that announcements are starting to come on Nintendo Today instead, which means that YouTubers will be cut out entirely. Okay. YouTubers will be going through their day-to-day lives, not doing much of anything. And then the news will break. Nintendo Direct update. Nintendo app exclusive, and all these games are announced and they're all lined up in a row and everyone knows. There's going to be so much to talk about that it's going to be very, very difficult for YouTubers to do that thing where they go through everything and just write everything off, okay? We saw that a lot with Tomodachi specifically and Kirby Air Riders, where you had a lot of people coming out and try to say the game was bad, it wasn't very good, that it wasn't going to succeed. And the simple fact of the matter is that it just isn't true. What we're seeing now is that we're seeing how this kind of rhetoric of being upset at every single Nintendo game that gets announced, how it's going to backlash eventually. We're seeing this now with Pokemon Champions. Right, because we were told day one by a lot of people that this game was a disaster. It was one of the worst games ever made. It was a huge disappointment for Pokemon fans. And yet, in reality, it did very, very well. And people are very much enjoying it. I've been enjoying it, right? But again, the grifters tried to push this idea that it was doing badly. And again, this is what we see every major Nintendo release cycle. Is in the pre-release period and during the initial release, you have this bombardment of people who are trying to say the game is bad and that you shouldn't buy it, that it's that it has all these problems and that you shouldn't support it. And the reality is, actual players come away with really positive feelings towards it. We saw this with Tomodachi, we saw this with the Mario Tennis Fever, we saw this with Princess Peach Showtime and Mario and Luigi Brothership. I still see people trying to downplay Mario and Luigi Brothership, and it's downright embarrassing, how the general community is just doing everything they possibly can to write off and ignore these games. It's something that really does need to be brought up and something that needs to be understood. That Nintendo is dominating right now, and there's nothing the gaming industry can do to stop them. And what I think is happening is that we're starting to see the influencers, the gaming YouTubers, the shills, the game journals, they're losing all of their influence in real time. By the time that Splatoon 4 comes out, okay, these DSP and Max Dude are gonna be 45, okay? Do you really think 45-year-old men are gonna be able to gaslight people into thinking that oh, this isn't it, champ, oh, this isn't good, I only play mature games like Street Fighter? That's not gonna work. Okay, that's the situation we're in now. Is that we're seeing the old the old established influencers being phased out, and nobody younger is really replacing them because there's so many people vying for control and for influence that you have a lot of conflicting opinions. And if you have a lot of conflicting opinions, it's very difficult to establish an overwhelming consensus like we've been used to for the past 30 years. And if you don't have an overwhelming consensus, that means people will debate incessantly, and eventually Nintendo will win because those are people who actually play the games are going to stick around, while inevitably the grifters and the shills are going to have to move on to the next thing. And that's kind of what we've been seeing happen time and time again over the past year, is that we were told Mario Kart World was going to bomb. We were told $80 was too much. We were told it was a bad game. 15 million units sold. It's well on its way to outselling Elden Ring and being one of the most successful games ever made. We were told that Kirby Air Riders would be a disaster. Didn't happen. We were told that Pokepia was going to be a nothing burger. It's the highest rated game this year. Okay, that game's probably going to be one of the best games on Switch 2 in its entire run. Okay, and now we're seeing the same thing happen with Tomodachi. which is a Switch 1 game, but you get my point, right? You understand what I'm saying, that like the attempts at subverting and destroying Nintendo IPs have completely failed, and it is high time that we start acknowledging that.